X-Men, issue number 1 of 1991. Find out how it changed a generation and made history for comic books. Coming up on the next All Comics Access. Hey, welcome to All Comics Access. I'm your host, Joe the Beast McCoy, aka The Mixed Marvel, and I am extremely excited about this episode because we are talking about something near and dear to my heart, the X-Men. As many of my friends may know, or fellow colleagues, I am a die-hard fan of the X-Men universe. They have made some dynamic moments in comic book history, but none like that of X-Men of the 90s. For myself and many others that first started collecting in the 90s, we were kids, some people were teenagers as well, nothing set the stage like X-Men number 1 of 1991. Now, this is what's crazy and what led up to it. So Marvel was already making major moves, of 1990, when you had the talented Mr. Todd McFarlane doing Spider-Man number 1 of the Torment series. What's crazy, it sold over 2 million copies. It's like, whoa, that's pretty epic. But then comes the talented Rob Liefeld, another talented young artist on the scene. And with his help and artistry on X-Force number 1 in the summer of 1991, 5 million copies were making history. Boom, 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 just left and right over time. That's essentially what it got up to, made marks. Marvel just knew, hey, we're on the right track with this stuff. But then in October of 1991, something epic hit the newsstand, comic book shelves, and everywhere you can imagine. X-Men number 1 with the two legendary individuals, Chris Claremont and Jim Lee, teaming up to make pure awesomeness for all of us. Now, what's pretty interesting is the forethought that went into creating such an electrifying comic that changed, most of our lives, I could say, as far as, developing our love for the great genre that is X-Men. So what was pretty cool, for some that may not know, until the 90s, essentially, comics beforehand were printed on like newspaper type of material. Now, what's pretty interesting with the evolution in technology at the time, what was pretty awesome, artists were able to do computer colorization, which allowed those great pictures to jump out at us even more so than before. And as we know too, you had all these hungry young artists that, Marvel started hiring, and, each one was trying to level up, so to speak. But, before we get into the artistry, we want to talk about, one part of the Central Foundation, Mr. Chris Claremont. For those that do not know, for us that are X-Men fans, he's essentially the godfather, the OG of the X-Men world. Mr. Chris Claremont brought back to life, essentially resurrected the X-Men comics in 1975 with his wonderful work on Giant Size X-Men. Beforehand, there was a bit of a lull as far as the X-Men world was going. The comics weren't selling so much, and they were essentially trying to figure out what to do with it. When Mr. Chris Claremont came on the scene, he offered a refreshing new outlook, helping add wonderful things to the X-Men at the time. And what was great, due to his work, it was the most diverse superhero team in comics. And from 1975 on, the X-Men kept climbing towards greatness. Now, we want to look at the great one, the legend, who's still an epic artist. That is Mr. Jim Lee. So what was amazing about Jim Lee was his eye for detail with each and every piece of art he did for the comic. Now, Marvel knew they had something special on their hands because Mr. Jim Lee, before he stepped into X-Men number 1 of 1991, he did great work on Alpha Flight number 51, Punisher the War Journal, And what's pretty interesting, some may not know, Mr. Lee also did some work on an X-Men comic beforehand, Uncanny X-Men number 248. So that was pretty awesome. Now, what was interesting about his art was he had, as I said before, the eye for detail, but essentially how he offered the lifelike journey through each, penciling stroke, that we could see. Because I have to say for myself, especially as a kid, it was absolutely mind-blowing. And, as some may not know, he always had appreciation for the arts such as ancient Greece and ancient Rome, which some say have added to his wonderful, art palette. And what's pretty cool too, fun little fact as well, he did some pre-med. Some say that is possible. That could have added to his appreciation for getting those details down, not only with the art, but especially with the anatomy of the art, which is pretty awesome. Alright, so what else is pretty epic is, by the time 91 hit, you had the creation of, the original X-Men, as we know, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Iceman, and Angel. That's from back in the 60s. But then you had all these fabulous individuals that came up in 75. Everyone from Nightcrawler, Colossus, the Storm, and a whole host of other X-Men characters. So they had the great idea, brainstorming, putting everything together that, hey, let's put them all together, but we'll separate them into two different teams. And all my X-Men fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You had the Blue Squad and the Gold Squad, or, the official name, the Blue Team and the Gold Team. So it was pretty epic too. It was explained very nicely by Professor X in the comic that, hey, you know what? One set of you guys will deal with issues here, and you other folks will deal with issues over there. So what was pretty cool to allow the X-Men to cover a much larger ground in that universe. Something else that was pretty cool was a rendition on the costumes and everything. Had a nice, cool, sleek look that I thought was pretty awesome. And later on when X-Men cartoon came out, X-Men the animated series, I should say, of the 90s, we saw these same costumes brought to life that we're used to seeing in the comic at the time. Also, another one of my favorite parts about this comic was the resurrection of the Nemesis, Magneto. And what I mean by that, for those that do not know, so Magneto and Charles Xavier had a little bit of a friendship. They had made amends in the past. But when that new comic came out in the 90s, Magneto was ready to set stuff in motion, so to speak, to lay down the groundwork to seek out his philosophy and his so-called liberation for mutants at the time. Of course, this was conflicting with Charles Xavier's idea of peace and unity. So then we had the stage set for the great rivalry that was meant to come in the X-Men comics. So another pretty epic thing that we saw in the X-Men comic as well at the time, even something simple as what they did in the training room. They were essentially training, working hard to build up the idea of staying focused. They never let their guard down, to build that sense of integrity. We saw that Charles Xavier was laying the groundwork for greatness with his team. And, being a kid reading something like this definitely had a lot to draw from it. And, even those that were teens or adults at the time as well. So we saw that the X-Men were getting back to basics. And essentially, this helped myself and so many others develop a love for a team that would have went overshadowed. So I think that's pretty electrifying, the mark that X-Men issue number 1 of 1991 made on the Marvel Universe. And to this day, I am still a massive fan, in case you couldn't tell by the stuff in the back and what I'm wearing. So, yeah. Alright, so last but not least, fine folks, I want to know, what's your thoughts on it? What's your favorite moment of X-Men issue number 1, or just X-Men comics in general. If you are an X-Men fan, what's inspired you from it? Tell me your favorite thing, whatever, but comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Alright, my fellow geeks and geekettes, thank you for swinging by and hanging with me here on All Comics Access. So, just to let you know, before I step on out of here, that I'm going to recommend you grab some goodies, as usual. So, first and foremost, please pre-order your copy of X-Men by Chris Claremont, and also Mr. Jim Lee, Volume 2 of the Omnibus series. That beauty will be coming out in March of 2021, but click the link below to reserve your copy today. I promise you will not be disappointed. It combines everything from issue 1 to 9, I think, of X-Men number 1, along with other different X-Men comics that come together, bring to life that beautiful art and some of those great things we were talking about. Also, please always keep in mind to support your local comic book shops. In case you're not able to get the Omnibus or something else, get some of those old school comic books I was talking about of the 90s. Always look out for your local, because your local comic book shops are a lifeline of basically why we even have what we have today. And last but not least, please check out my bro, Superheroes Ultimate, at superheroesultimate.com for all your awesome X-Men goodies. He has everything from Wolverine compression shirts to X-Men pops, and you name it, he got it. But I promise you, if you do swing by there, it will not be at a loss. So it was pretty awesome. If you do click the link below to his site, I will be giving you 15% off, which is pretty awesome. So nice little code down there to help you out. Alright, thank you so much for stopping by, giving me a piece of your time. And I know these are crazy wild times out here. I don't care if you read comic books, watch anime, keep doing what you do. That helps you escape the madness out here. And whenever you feel like giving up, don't do that. But always keep in mind that tomorrow's another day. It's greater things that lie in store. And most importantly, when you're feeling down and out, rise up and geek on.
If you see Francis, tell him I'm looking for him. I need to find him. Let me know where he is. He's gonna get served.